Welcome.
Yes, perfect.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a new edition of the Future Food Series by Zintinus and ProVeg Incubator. I'm Albrecht Wolfmeyer, head of the ProVeg Incubator, and my co-host is Fabio Siemsen, partner at Zintinus. Hi, Fabio.
Hi, Iris. It's good to see you again after the summer, and I'm really looking forward to today's session. We have some really amazing speakers here, and we are talking about the impressive and really huge topic of mycelium. So I'm also very curious and on today's session. So yeah, but before we start, Albrecht, what's going on at the ProVeg Incubator?
Yes, it's the time of the year where we are selecting a new cohort of startups. The cohort will kick off in September. We have made some amazing investments in recent months in some of our alumni in plant-based seafood, for example. And we are changing the way we are doing all of this to be more agile and to be more open to the startups' needs. So we are taking in startups now, more or applications of startups on a rolling basis, and then we decide if they can already join the earliest cohort possible. But we will also start supporting them already on the way. So for all startup founders out there, this is really important news. If you wanna join our program, feel free to apply anytime, and we will get back to you as soon as we can afterwards and see what we can do together, even in between cohorts. What's happening at Zintinus?
Yeah, thank you, Albrecht. And after you have successfully being part of the ProVeg Incubator program, you can contact us because Zintinus is a growth food tech fund. So we are investing Series A to Series B companies in the field of food innovation and food tech. And for us, it was also a very, very exciting summer. We have just closed 2 investments, which will be announced soon. So this was, I would say, quite a busy time. And yeah, we are looking at our second close in September, and I must say that what we see at the moment in the environment of food tech and in general in the alternative protein space or in the clean nutrition space is really surprising, I would say. It's not that we see that everything is going down. It's still a talk of town, and we get a lot of interest in what we are doing. And I mean, we see it also from our today's audience, and there's so much interest in the topic, and this makes me really that's what I'm really looking for. So just to give a bit some, I would not say housekeeping rules for today, but as it is for all the ones who are the first time at our Future Food series, we have a special Q&A section here. So you can use the normal chat function. I see it that you are already using it a lot. Please put in where you're from, and also maybe if you're interested, your LinkedIn profile with 1 or 2 keywords, so that everybody can know, okay, who's working in which field, or how's the combination to mycelium. And for questions related to our topic or to our expert, please use the Q&A section. So let's kick it off.
Thank you. Yeah, so welcome again to not only the panelists here, which we will get to know shortly, but also the very international crowd. I just looked at the chat. There are people from Argentina, from India, from Paris, I'm seeing London here. So yeah, it's actually all across the globe and all across Europe as well. And so yeah, and we have a very international panel here as well. So this is going to be fun and very interesting. And I'm curious to see and hear all the questions from that international audience as well. So yeah, let's get started with our panel round. So to get to know everyone and to get started, I would like to introduce Martin Rühl from the University Gießen first. He's the head of the working group for biochemical and molecular biological food analytics and biotechnology. That's a long title at the Justus Liebig University Gießen. And he's really a mushroom and in particular a mycelium expert. So I would give you the floor now to introduce yourself, your work, and why you're excited about this space. And at the current, take us with you on a journey at along the current developments and the scientific background of all of this, of the realm of mycelium.
Thanks, Albert. Yeah, and thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to do so. So, yeah, maybe first of all, before I show you some slides, which I had 50 minutes to prepare, just for myself. So I'm working now since 30 years with mushrooms. That's due to the fact that I grew up on a mushroom farm, and afterwards studying biotechnology and then going for technical mycology before heading to Gießen, where I'm more related to the food chemistry part. And here, as Albrecht mentioned, I do have a working group since last year, a professorship for food systems biotechnology, and we're also working with fungi here at the Fraunhofer Institute in Gießen. So that's very shortly for me, and I would like to share some very few slides to bring you in the topic of mushrooms and why are they so exciting. I'm trying to share my screen here. So I hope you can see now a very impressive picture of one of my favorite mushrooms, which is called Iglesias. It's a black poplar mushroom, and that's actually the form of mushrooms we know and we are consuming since ancient times. And of course, also this industrial area is growing in recent years. You can see here that was from a publication we had in 2016, and you can see by this chart that the worldwide production is increasing tremendously within the past years, and that's probably due to the fact that especially China, the worldwide biggest producer of mushrooms, is producing the most mass of mushrooms, but also in Europe. We are increasing in the mushroom production. In Germany, we are around 60,000 tons per year, but also increasing. And I think right now we are already, so that's from 2013, right now we're already at the 70,000 tons of mushrooms. Just as last slide for the mushrooms, because we want to talk about mycelium. Those are the most popular ones in Germany. Of course, there are many more which we can use for a fruiting body production. So fruiting body are those things you can buy in the supermarket, which are the sexual reproduction organisms of those fungi. In China, you do have much more varieties. And one thing why we can do, or why those mushrooms are so valuable for us, is of course their nutrition parameters, but also their sustainable production system. And here, just want to show the next slide, because what you can do, and I think that's what we would like to talk about today, and I'm very excited about this discussion. What we can do with those mushrooms, we can not only use them for production of fruiting bodies, so these ancient or standard food, we can also use them for a kind of submerged fermentation, where you provide them with different other substrates, even side streams from the food industry, because they do have an enzymatic system which they are capable of hydrolyzing, so degrading the different substrates, taking up the nutrients and producing alternative protein sources. And that's what we're doing here also in Gießen within different projects. And I just want to guide you to our the main steps. So we do have around 500 different edible fungi here, and we're screening those fungi for their possibility to grow on different side streams. And if we find a match, so a substrate fungus match, we're going for a larger scale production. So you can see here this second scale up. So that's a laboratory fermenter. And afterwards, if we can see that we do have the optimal parameter for the fermentation, we're going into large scale. And that's not very large, but for us, it's large. And afterwards, of course, then the industrial scale production comes into place. And on the table on the right side, you can see different strains. Due to regulatory reasons, I cannot show you the strains here, but the table gives you an impression of what we're looking for. So we're looking for a good conversion ratio of our substrates, because we want to have a high amount of protein at the end, and we do not want to have so much rest of the substrate left. And here, of course, 2 points are very important, which is in first instance, the nitrogen and the amino acid composition. You can see here, because we want to have a high protein amount in our mycelium. And of course, we want to have a high share of a fungus inside. So you can see here, depending on the strain you're using and depending on the substrate you're using, you might end up with different protein contents, and of course also with a different fungal share at the end, because you cannot separate the substrate and the fungus at the end of your fermentation system. And below the table, just to sum up, there are things which are also important for a industrial production, namely the odor impression, for example. How is the impact by ourselves, by our noses, and of course also the taste. Do we have a specific bitter taste? Do we have a sandiness in our product? Because those are, of course, also parts which are important when it comes to the final product out of those vegetative mycelium. Yeah, and I think I didn't hit the 5 minutes. Yeah, happy for the discussion.
Martin, may I ask one question regarding the slide? Can you explain what the zeros and the pluses under growth speed, how you define the growth speed? That would be very helpful.
So in first instance, growth speed is for us, we're looking just by eye to see whether we do have a better growth or a less growth. In a large scale fermentation, we would calculate that on the basis of a CO2, O2 consumption. So CO2 production, O2 consumption. There are also some biomass monitoring facilities, but that's a bit too tricky to discuss it here. Yeah, so it's just for us to assign, can we have a good growth or do we have a bad growth? Because of course, that's also important afterwards. It's always better to have a short production period because time is money.
Terrific, such a great overview to the topic here, really, and so many things that we can touch upon now. But first, to the next speaker on the panel.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Martin. This was very helpful for setting the scene, let's say it like this. Our next speaker is Daniel Mcgowan. Francisco, his co-founder, couldn't manage to be here today because he is sick, but we are more than happy that you jumped in. And I think you have also very, very good track record when it comes not only about the topic of producing mycelium for future generations and future consumption, but also what you did in your past. I think this is a very, very good story, how you really transformed or how you really changed the way you're working in the food ecosystem.
Yeah, hi, thanks very much. Very glad to be here. So yeah, I started off as a corporate lawyer, which isn't very helpful at the moment, but I then started my own business and started a burger chain here in Hamburg, and we expanded to 5 locations, and I then sold it to a private equity company to fully focus on my current startup, which is Keen for Greens, soon to be renamed Kinda. But working for 8 years on the burger business obviously gave me a good insight into consumer demand and the shift in the products that we're consuming. And we started swapping out some of the products we were using for vegan alternatives in about 2018. And then in 2019, I started my own company with Francisco as my co-founder, and we started producing vegan meat alternatives. We then saw the sort of the shortage of pea protein in the market, and when we were looking for co-producers to produce our vegan meat alternatives, and that really made us think about where alternative proteins would come from in the next 4 to 5 years. And that's when we started looking into mycelium, so trying to get away from soy, wheat, or pea protein to an alternative protein that could be produced locally. And we then started putting together a team of scientists, and we're now a team of about 14 people, mainly on the engineering and scientific side, and going away from producing the end product that we then sell to consumer and trying to, well, we have a dual focus now on the mycelium itself. So really looking at strain and side stream optimization and on the bioreactors. And talking about bioreactors, that might be something that we might discuss later, but there's a real bottleneck of bioreactors in the market. So, it's great that lots of companies are looking at fermentation, discovering fermentation as a source of alternative proteins. But I think a lot of companies are now really experiencing the bottleneck in the market. So you either can't get the bioreactors, or if you do, they're very expensive, or they have very long lead time. Our advantage is that we are able to build our own bioreactors, and we can do that at a fraction of the usual price of conventional bioreactors. And that allows us to scale pretty quickly. And so we're now in the process of building a production facility near Hamburg. We're in the middle of buying a 6,000 square meter piece of land, building a production site of about 600 square meters, which will house our lab and the bioreactors. Now, a lot of fermentation companies are trying to go big in terms of the size of their bioreactor, sort of 50,000 liters, 100,000 liters. Our aim is to produce lots of 1,000 liters bioreactors. And now Dr. Rühl showed that bioreactor. That's obviously how we started, with a small pilot plant and then gradually going up in size. Now we're almost at 1,000 liters, and that's our aim, because what we want to do is have a very automated process. So that the growth in the bioreactor, then harvesting, all of that gets automated, and we can take our bioreactors and they sort of go in a sort of industrial dishwasher where they're cleaned and then go back into the process. We have a growth period of 5 to 7 days for the mycelium, and our focus will be on becoming a B2B supplier to the users of the mycelium to then produce the end product. So our focus isn't on the end product. It's rather working with other producers who have the expertise, and that's not just vegan meat alternatives, but it could be normal meat producers or pet food producers, anybody that has a need for these alternative proteins. Now, what I'll finish in a second, but what we're also doing is we're building mobile fermentation units, because our aim is to have these 1,000 liter bioreactors. What we want to do is we're in the process, we have 2 shipping containers, and we are fitting them out with our bioreactors so that we can have those bioreactors producing mycelium wherever it is needed. Because what we see is that a lot of energy is used to then turn the mycelium into a powder to then get it ready for shipping. What we want to do is being able to move our bioreactors to where the mycelium is needed, and then producing mycelium on site to then go straight into the production process. So by the end of the year, we're hoping to have the 2 shipping containers ready. The first shipping container is going to the DIL, the German Institute of Food Technologies, and will be used there for research and production purposes. And yeah, so that's our focus. It's on the mycelium and on the bioreactors, and really automating and scaling that process.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Pleasure.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, you all have so much to say. I think we cannot we have to beat the 5 minutes. We'll do our best to give everyone the time they need here, and also to get into a discussion also among the panel and with the audience. Next up is Isabella Iglesias Musacchio from Basketfuls. She's the founder there and the CEO, and we got to know her as part of our when she joined the ProVeg Incubator. And yeah, she really was so passionate about the mycelium and fermentation approach that since then she has really made I would say, a terrific journey. And so tell us all about it, Isabella, or as much as you can in 5 minutes.
Great, thanks, Albrecht. Yeah, so I guess I'll just tell a little bit about my background, and then how BOSC came about. So I'm Isabella. I'm the founder and CEO of Bosk. Prior to that, however, I had studied sustainable agriculture. So that's what my degree was in. And from there, I really understood what was broken about the food system and what we needed to do to fix it, at least a little bit from the beginning. From there, I started to get very into fermentation and specifically working with fungi, and experimented over the course of a little bit over a decade. But that was always just my passion in the background. So I knew that when I started a company, I wanted it to be working with fermentation and specifically working with fungi. And because I had already become a vegan by that time, I also knew I wanted to create a food product that was specifically focused on producing better alternatives for consumers to also help them make a switch. That, however, was always just like a passion. It was a side hobby. My career was mostly spent in working with different tech startups. So I helped to build a few startups and then scale ups in the US and then in Europe and a little bit in Asia. And the most recent company I had helped work for was Infarm, so a vertical farming company in Germany that I helped expand to the US and Canada and then Japan. So I had my experience working with different companies and then was able to combine that with my passion to start Bosk. So as Albrecht mentioned, we met about maybe 2 years ago now, or for the first time, when this idea was really just coming to life. And I went through the ProVeg Accelerator program and started to build Bosk from there. So what we're doing at Bosk is we're working with a different type of fermentation process than Daniel at Keen for Greens. We work with a solid state fermentation process to produce pure mycelium though. And we use that to make next generation alternatives, meat alternatives. So we're focusing specifically on whole cuts. And we really see this as the ability for us to really unlock the potential of the fungi kingdom in completely different ways than a lot of other companies are doing today. So yeah, long story short, we're focused on both B2C, but also B2B eventually. We're working on whole cut meat alternatives, specifically chicken and pork today. I can talk a little bit about our journey up until now. So we started at ProVeg Incubator, and that's really where we were able to kick off our R&D. And from there, because we were able to produce our prototypes quite quickly and get to a proof of concept, we were admitted into IndieBio. And so we moved to the US, and that's why today we're both an American and a German company. And from there, we were able to really push forward our R&D quite considerably to the point where we could now come back to Germany, start our R&D lab here, and we're actually starting to scale up our production today. So similar to Keen for Greens, I think we're in that process of trying to scale within the next 6 to 12 months to a pilot stage. And I think, we'll get into the conversation with the other folks on the panel today, but scaling your production, I think, is one of the biggest challenges when you're dealing with the fermentation, specifically for mycelium production. So happy to share our insights there. But yeah, we're excited to share more about our journey. I guess one thing to say as well is in the future, I think there's more products than we can just do beyond whole cuts and beyond meat alternatives. I think there's the sky is kind of the limit in terms of the applications for mycelium, even outside of the food industry itself. So we can share Bosk's perspective on that and our greater vision. But yeah, in the beginning, focusing on whole cuts, have to execute one thing well first. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Isabella. One question: how does it come that you're focusing not only on chicken but also on was it meat or pig? Meat, was it, right?
Pork, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's pork.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you're choosing both streams and not one food or one solution.
Yeah, I think it just that gives you a little bit of an insight into our product portfolio and the pipeline of products. So we have even beyond that products that we're working on today, because we see that there's a wide variety of applications that you can have with mycelium, at least the way that we're producing it. So the mycelium we produce is almost like a blank canvas by the time we harvest it. And it has a very inherent fibrous texture that allows us to essentially produce these types of whole cuts or new types of alternatives for meat or other products in the future as well, that can have a variety of uses. And it also depends on the strain we're working with and the substrate as well, and how that impacts texture, taste, nutrition, the nutritional composition, and so on. So long story short, I think you can think of what we're building at Bosc as not only the end products, but a fermentation platform by which we can produce mycelium in, like, our long-term vision is in many different ways, depending on the strain, depending on the substrate. And then we will then process that into different products that we feel it best can be applied to. The reason we're focusing on chicken and pork in the beginning is because we see that our mycelium has a very good application for those types of products. And at the end of the day, we're also using that to show the versatility of what we can do, to showcase that not only for, of course, for consumers, but also for the B2B types of clients that we want to get in the future as well. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Isabella. No problem. Our next speaker is Ivan Jimenez from Mexico. He is the founder of Exponential Foods and Asante. And welcome, Ivan.
Thank you very much, Albert, Fabio. Yeah, it's a pleasure reconnecting also with Isabella, with whom I shared some time last year. So let me briefly tell you a little bit of my background and what we're building in Asante and why we have two names. So I'll start with that. So we started Asante in Mexico, but very soon we realized that in order to have the impact in climate change that we wanted to address, having a food in the US, where the largest market of meat is currently growing and expanding, was very important. And also, I have a background in, my family used to be cattle farmers. And this is something that many people don't know, but Mexico is the largest exporter of cattle in the world. And that's because we're growing beef, then we move it walking from Chihuahua or Sonora to Texas, and then we import the fillets or the ribeyes cut. So we wanted to build a platform that was producing plant-based meat in Mexico and then exporting it to the US so that we could take advantage of the logistics and the scale of this international commerce, while also mitigating the effects on the planet. So circling a little bit back, that's the reason we have Exponential Foods as our core company in the US and the SOF in Mexico. And I am an industrial engineer. I have an experience mainly in finance. I started working in Unilever, then I moved to private equity real estate. I went to Kellogg, and when I came back, I started working in infrastructure and energy. And this is where it really hit that in Mexico, we were not doing anything about climate change. And the exposure that we have, not only with the 3,000 kilometers of littorals, but also with the very deficient use of our land and our resources was overwhelming. And just to give you an example, in the world, the average is that 30% of land and water is dedicated to meat, but in Mexico it's almost 50%. So we started with Asante, and when we created the brand, it was a celebratory moment because we realized that despite we were not born vegan, we were able to create meat from plants. It tasted delicious for our palate, and we just celebrated. It was about bringing more people to the table. It was about evolving the traditions and getting our Mexican culture, our culinary heritage out to the world. But very soon we will also realize of two important things. The first one is that the amount of available proteins in the world were not going to be enough if we wanted to really have a dent on global meat. And we needed to work on exponential solutions. We needed to work in resilient and sustainable solutions such as mycelium. So we started investing at the middle of the life of the company and a little bit before we entered ProVeg last year. And as I mentioned, I don't have a scientific background, but I have been fermenting and working with bread like for almost 20 years. So I'm very passionate about the subject. And what really differentiates mycelium from other kinds of fermentation is that fungi is an organism that is alive, and it depends on the substrate, as Dr. Martin mentioned, and as all the other panelists mentioned. The relationship with the substrate and the strain is super, super tight, but it is also tight in terms of the completely different flavors that you can find. I mean, the enzymes that you can find when you're growing agaricus in corn is completely different as what you can observe when you grow it in amaranth or in other substrate. So it's for us has been an amazing journey. And of course, when you're trying to build something that has the potential of solving a problem like climate change, especially when we're seeing such a pressing, all the news that we see take us into an urgency or an emergency status. But we have to realize that we're working with biology, and when you're working with biology has its own time. You cannot rush it. You can just learn as fast as you can. We have been very lucky so far that we were able to create the first whole cut fillet in Latin America. We're the first company to do that. We're the first company of creating a bacon, and we also have an advanced development for taking these products to market without using the refrigerated or frozen supply chain, which in our opinion is also problematic, right? Because if you're trying to modify a system that depends on the energy hungry supply chain, it's just maintaining the status quo of this problem. So we're very excited that we're close to 12 months of shelf life, while maintaining the culinary experience and the flavors, the taste, and it's for us an exciting moment, because right now we're looking to raise more capital to make a commercial launch and really get these products to accompany our plant-based products that are currently in the US and Mexican markets. So sorry if I extended a little bit.
It's becoming a good tradition, so don't worry about it. Alan Ramos from Libre Foods, and now it's your turn.
It's my turn now to be short and sweet.
Whatever you like, yes, and whichever way you choose. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm super happy to be here and along such great panelists here today. Yeah, so I mean, just quickly about my background, it's a bit more unconventional, but I think unconventional has been a little red thread throughout our company up until now. Actually, ProVeg and myself go way back because ProVeg was where I started my career in alternative proteins. My background is in philosophy. I studied philosophy in university, had a minor in Chinese, which led me to move to Taiwan after I graduated. Basically got really connected with what I would describe as my most like personal conviction in terms of what I wanted to use my career to do so. At that point, I had already made the transition to vegan, and I had really understood all the implications that it had on the environment. Once you find out about that linkage, it's very difficult to unknow what you know, right? So for me, it's how can I dedicate myself to have an impact, and I want to do it through food. At the time, the only organization that had that specific focus was based in Berlin. I had no similar background in entrepreneurship or innovation, but one thing that I had very, very clear was the conviction to be part of the change that I wanted to see. You know, you had to put your money where your mouth was. So I took a one-way flight to Berlin, and Albrecht probably remembers that I knocked on the doors of the incubator, basically asking for a job, or basically asking for an opportunity to start. And that was the opportunity that I was able to combine two different things of mine that I was very passionate about. So number one was purpose, and number two was sustainability. At that ProVeg Incubator, it was a project that was just taking off. I got the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs from all over the world and got to really understand the industry inside and out. I completely fell in love with everything that is alternative proteins. Got to work with some of the brightest entrepreneurs in the space. That really taught me a lot about where we need to go, right, as an industry. Considering that, you know, impact has always been one of the biggest drivers for me personally, leaving the incubator to launch Libre, you know, had to follow that same sequence. And for me, you know, getting to meet so many people, getting to see so many companies and technologies as well as products, right, it was very important for me to be able to do something different and to think not only about how do we feed people better now, but how do we feed people in general in the future, right? So we need to think short-term and long-term at the same time. And that's how I came across biotechnology. And that's how we started to have this focus upon how we can grow food indoors 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for a growing population with ever decreasing resources, right? So that's how Libre was born. Another thing that I wanted to mention about Libre is that, you know, we have very clear that, you know, we have this great foundation that the alternative protein industry has been built upon, but it's now the responsibility of what I like to think about these new school kind of companies that have to take this foundation and then push it even further, right? That's why we've mentioned at Libre a few times that we won't make, you know, chicken breast. We won't make chicken nuggets. We make chicken breast. We won't make anything around burgers. We'll make steaks as well. And we don't make any sausages. We make bacon, right? Which we think is one of the coolest products out there. So Libre Foods is a climate-driven company, and we're set to replace consumers' most favorite meats on an everyday basis, starting with our bacon product. We are a B2C company. We do realize that, you know, based on this impact that we want to have, that impact, we want to have it with consumers. We want to have it on the shelves. And as a company that's only over a year old, we don't have the same luxury as companies from before to spend 5 years in R&D, right? In order for us to really make a dent in the market and compete with the meat companies that we want to get out of the shelves, we have to be as market savvy as they are, right? And we have to be very smart about how we enter the market and when we enter the market. So that's always dictated our strategy to be very product focused, right? So with that being said, we're very excited that we're launching our very first product at the end of this year. So we have a November launch date for the first ever mushroom-based bacon in the EU. Which will very casually just be showcasing at the New Food Conference on September 29th in Berlin. And if you haven't gotten your tickets, now's your chance. Leave it at that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alan. This is really amazing. With the first mushroom-based bacon, do you face any novel food regulation topics, or how you handle this?
We don't face this challenge for our bacon. However, this has been a strategy that we've had to adapt to be able to meet this requirement, both on the scaling side of things and on the regulatory. Mm-hmm. So we closed our seed round in February of this year, and all the prototypes that we made were with MYCELIUM. However, considering how focused we are on gaining these market learnings, we adapted that strategy so that we're working with the fruiting bodies of the mushrooms, which are already approved in the EU, to be able to get onto the market in the timeline that we expected, while we continue developing our technology in the background.
Okay, and can you tell a bit more about your go-to-market strategy? Or do you also want to prepare already the right narrative when it comes at one point in time MYCELIUM-based solution?
Definitely. I mean, so for us, what is really fascinating here about, this organism that we're working with, which is fungi, is that, I mean, it's an umbrella of benefits, right? We work with different parts of the organism for different products that we're developing, right? When we made our first prototypes with MYCELIUM, they worked really well. They had a good bite to them. But for example, crispiness was something that we were having some issues with, right? And even though MYCELIUM is a fascinating technology, at the end of the day, that's not what motivates consumers to buy a product at the store, right? If a bacon doesn't crisp, you probably don't buy that bacon more than once, right? And then never again. So we had to reformulate that and figure out, okay, how do we deliver on this taste and texture and experience of our products? So for us, we've stuck to the narrative of fungi, right? We make fungi-based products, and we adapt each of our product based on the part of that fungi that is most suiting for that specific product.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. I mean, this already touches upon a couple of other areas, especially regulatory issues, strategic or go-to-market issues as well, product strategy and so on. But since we have a company from North America, we have two that are focusing on the US and on Europe, on the European Union, starting with Germany in some cases. I wonder if you can go over these regulatory challenges. Alan explained how you're tackling it. You're sort of postponing it at the moment, as I understand it. Ivan, in the US, it's easier because we have already products on the market. A few companies are working on it. So what is the situation? What does it depend on if you can you just launch a product, as you said you are going to do soon?
Correct. So so I cannot be super transparent on the strategy, but I can tell you what we have observed. And what we have observed is that the couple of companies that are selling in the market right now, one went through the process of making sure that the strain that they're using was okay by the FDA, and the process that they did for that was conducting a number of trials. I am not aware if they have to go through clinical trial because they were not claiming any medicinal property or any specific benefit related to health for the consumers. So if they don't do this, perhaps they can avoid the clinical trials. But they definitely need to make sure that the products are not creating an allergy, especially if it's not a strain that is usually known as food or that usually has been consumed in markets or in restaurants.
And Martin, and then also Daniel and Isabella, but first Martin, from a perspective of looking at the European Union and EFSA here, what do you think is the situation? How do we assess the current situation? When we will get approval? What does it depend on?
I do not know when there will be the approval for
no one knows, of course. But what can we say?
Take quite a long time. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, it's of course for the customer a border that nothing will be sold and can be consumed, which might be toxic. Although I have to say that I think due to the fact that most companies, and I think, or probably all companies, are working with mushrooms, so edible fungi, which has been consumed since hundreds of years by us, I think the risk is very low, if not there is no risk, because the differences are marginal between fruiting bodies and vegetative mycelium when it comes to the ingredients, let's say like that. Yeah. So, but of course, it's regulation affairs, and everybody has to apply. Of course, after some time, it will get probably a normal case, because then everybody can use the different fungi as novel food. But right now, it's a hurdle which other countries do not face. Especially about Europe.
Thanks. Daniel, how are you tackling this? What is your approach?
Yeah, we've always been of the opinion that MYCELIUM is not a novel food, and there's been a recent paper published by Professor Dr. Berger, arguing the same, mainly focusing on the genetic difference between the fruiting body and the mycelium. So basically, there's no difference between the two. And so our argument has always been that it shouldn't fall under novel food. But it's there's a question mark of whether it is or it isn't. And so I think it's incumbent on us as a company to sort of have a plan B. And you know, we're in the process of building a huge production facility near Hamburg, and you know, we don't want to find out next year that you know, we can't sell it because it's novel food. So we have a sort of plan B and C, and so you know, being able to sell it to pet food companies, that's our go-to-market strategy. We also speaking to partners in the US. The advantage, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we have those mobile fermentation units. So we can take one of those units to the US to produce our mycelium there and work with partners to bring it to market. And then we're also looking at a novel food application in the EU, whilst at the same time arguing that it shouldn't be novel food.
Daniel, can you tell us, when you're talking about your module fermentation units, are you addressing then B2B companies who have side stream production or already biomass as leftovers who can be used, or what is your target?
But yeah, it could be either companies producing the side streams, so you know, whether those are flour mills or pea protein producers that are then left with lots of starch. They would have the opportunity to upcycle their product. So you know, there's a lot of starch on the market, you know, more than is really needed, and so they would have an opportunity to sort of create a higher volume product out of the leftover starch. So they would be able to have these mobile fermentation units on site to then be able to produce a mycelium out of it and sell it as an alternative protein. Or the other possibility is to have these mobile fermentation unit on site of a company producing the end product. So if you're, whatever it might be, whether you know, it's vegan nuggets or sausages or burger patties or bacon, so you could have the fermentation unit and producing the mycelium rather than having for it to be dry freezed. It just goes straight into the production process. So you're saving yourself a very energy intensive and expensive step, and the mycelium can go straight into the production process.
Fabio, I'd like to finish this little talk about regulatory issues and strategy with Isabella, because we heard plan A, B, C from Daniel already, but there might be a different approach still possible. Instead of just saying that it's not novel food, what do you think, Isabella?
Yeah, so I mean, we really rely on the expertise of the consultants that we've been working with, and also institutes that we did a research project with a little bit over 1.5 years ago. So that was also a German institute that worked with a few different mycelium companies working with mycelium, understanding, you know, is every single type of mycelium that's produced in Europe going to be considered novel or not? And the results of that study, and this is the same as the advice that we get from regulatory consultants, is that any mycelium, unless it's going to be one that's already been approved, would be considered novel, at least from a regulatory perspective. I also am of the opinion that I don't think it should be considered novel. I think there's enough evidence to say that there's not toxicity issues, and the composition is maybe so slight when compared to fruiting bodies that the mycelium itself is very much the same. But despite that, my understanding of novel food regulations is that even if you have an ingredient that may be similar, if the way to produce it is different, if that is why it's also considered novel. So because we're all producing something that is not only new, meaning it's mycelium, it's not the fruiting body, And because it's produced in a different way than maybe, for example, corn had produced the first type of mycoprotein that was given regulatory approval in Europe, then that is why we would be considered, or the products we produce would be considered novel. So that is our approach. You know, for us, our perspective is that, you know, we want to ensure consumers that the products we're producing and the ingredients that we're producing as well are made with the utmost care. And if regulatory say that we need to go through this process to ensure safety, then that's just what we're going to do. So that is our strategy. We're working in different regions with different regulatory consultants because the regulatory frameworks change depending on the region. Europe, of course, is one of them because we have a base in Germany, but we're looking at different markets as well. And you know, we're just going through the regulations as we need to. I would say the US, of course, is an interesting market, but there's also a regulatory environment there that you have to go through. Most obviously, it's GROS, so generally recognized as safe. So from my understanding, I'm working with consultants in North America and Europe and then other regions as well. And the US is good, but it also has a lot of companies that are applying. So there's, maybe a longer process than it would have taken a few years ago. And so that process can take anywhere between 12 to 15 months. In Europe, the regulatory process can take anywhere from basically 22 months on average, but that can become much longer depending on the tests that EFSA will require you to perform in order to ensure the safety of the product. So we are taking that into consideration for our costs and for our timeline to go to market, because we are producing mycelium, we're not producing the fruiting body. Therefore, we realize that at least our products and the way we take it, we are considered novel. Yeah. But hopefully, I think in a few years, other companies that may come down the line, they'll have it easier than us. I think right now, especially in Europe, it's definitely challenging for companies that are really trying to create these better products with newer solutions that have a great sustainable advantage, but we kind of have to pave the way for others to come.
Yeah. Isabella, can I ask you also one question that's pretty much related to the question that I asked Daniel? So who are for you, when it comes to the supply of, for example, the right medium or the right substrate, the most important partners? Are you also working with the traditional food industry or the conventional food industry? So how do you set up your new infrastructure or your new ecosystem as a food company?
Yeah, I think similar to Daniel's approach, we really look at where will our future production be, where are the future producers of our own feedstock and our substrate, because we want to locate everything in a way that is optimized, that cuts down on transportation, thereby makes our own footprint more sustainable. So we're looking at all of that in terms of our future planning to make sure that we have a supply chain that is not drastically far away and increases the amount of transport that has to take place to get our substrate to us and to get our material to our own production or CMOs for the end product. So long story short, another thing that we're taking into consideration are side streams. So we work with, and we're right now like interviewing and evaluating other types of producers that can deliver side streams to us that we can then use to upcycle in our process. And I think similar to the other companies here, there's a lot of variety in terms of the types of side streams that we can work with, at least for our process. Everything from, like Daniel was mentioning, maybe the cereal grain industries to, the list goes on, but essentially you need to find a substrate that has a composition that works well with your strain to get your desired end mycelium for the products that you want to make. And what we're doing, a large part of our work is evaluating different substrates, how they work with our strains, how they work with our process, and identifying the best types of producers for us. But that's a big part of the scale-up process as well, is ensuring that you have the right suppliers and that you can lock in a supply chain, because, there's challenges working with side streams, but one of them is that you need to ensure that you have that supply chain for when you scale. and that it can be consistent as you scale as well, for your own product's consistency as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a tricky one, but happy to go into it in more detail if you'd like. Yeah.
Okay. I think we will now use some of the questions that our audience has already raised. So coming for the first question, a very good one from my point of view, from Christian Diekmann. Besides alternative proteins, where do you think mushroom or mycelia or side streams of mycelia protein production also have a great potential in the application in food products? So maybe this is also a question to you, Martin. Oh, Isabella has already raised her hand. Okay, then please go for it.
I think, if I understand the question correctly, I think the question is what other types of food products, but I think I have a few ideas on this. I think there's a lot of variety in the food, in different types of food products that you can create for mycelium. You're already seeing it a bit in the US already. Nature's Find is a company that, is also a major pioneer for mycelium, that they've use theirs for not only burgers, but also dairy. And I think that'll be really interesting to see how companies apply mycelium, even in the types that companies here are producing, for not only meat and not only fish, but also dairy, and also potentially even protein powders for types of, like cereal products, like pastas, right? Flours. I think there's quite a bit of versatility that can be had, but of course the question is, what is the best application of the mycelium you're producing, and how do you execute that well? So I think there's a lot of variety in the types of food products, and what I find really exciting about the mycelium that we produce and the way that we produce it, which I have to say is like drastically different than how Asante and Keen for Greens produces it, is that we have applications beyond the food industry too, which for me is quite exciting, because I think there's quite a lot of versatility in mycelium, just beyond the food industry. So yeah, that's a little my 2 cents. Pass it over.
Yeah, Christian asked about Christian Diekmann. He's actually one of our mentors and also a food expert. So he must know that there's really like a huge range of applications in the food industry, and everything isn't per se, I think, alternative protein, but not necessarily what we consider as alternative protein. So I think, Martin, is one of your projects in Gießen or other projects, are they covering and exploring these other areas that could be relevant here?
Yeah, and just adding to the points Isabella mentioned. So, of course, one thing is vitamins. So vitamin D, for example, which is a big market, of course, and that is easily be generated out of mycelium, as we do have the precursors in hand. And there's already a novel food granted for vitamin D from mushrooms. Second is, of course, flavor enhancers. So we're working also on that, that you can enhance the flavor of other food types by adding secondary metabolites from mushrooms, for example. And the third type is, of course, also enzymes which are produced by the mushroom. So if you do liquid, so submerged fermentation, and you end up with the mycelium, you do have all the rest inside the cultural broth. And this, of course, is there's a lot of different enzymes in, which of course can also help to improve foods, to stabilize foods, to hydrolyze different other substrates. So there are a tremendous portfolio of applications we can think of, and also some of them we're working on.
What do you think is the most interesting if you would have to pick?
So right now, it's always the current project. So currently, because vitamin D is gone, so currently we're working on flavor enhancers and also on the hydrolysis of allergens, which is also quite an interesting point.
Cool.
To degrade allergens in food with fungal enzymes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Ivan, you want to add to that? Or?
Yes, I think that enzymes are fascinating. I think that they have Also, a lot of applications later for leather, for example. We have been able to grow leather that, of course, we prefer to use it for bacon or for other applications more related to meat. But the use for these other industries is amazing. And the other thing is all the other components that are health related. For instance, beta glucans. There are many compounds in depending on the strain that you're using that have a health benefit, and of course being able to make that claim that it has a direct help for your health is going to take some time to do the clinical studies, but I think that the potential of this technology, that we're just in the beginning of this, right? So we have to realize that we have been growing mushroom in a technical way with microbiological controls maybe 200 years ago. And animals have been improving their bioreactors for thousands of years. And we as humans raising animals, we have also been doing that for a very long time. So during this time, we have found that if you feed a pig in Spain a specific kind of acorn, then you produce jabugo instead of ham. So I think that it's very exciting to see what are the right combinations of strain, substrate, time of hydrolysis, addition of natural enzymes, and many other, I mean, all the thousand variables that we can think of in order that we can find the product that will convince the market that this is the absolute improvement to their usual meat diet. So it's very, very exciting time.
Thank you very much, Ivan. We have received 2 questions from Miguel, pretty much both related to seafood. One is addressed to Isabella, if you're planning to enter also into the seafood market, and the other one is if we see also some solutions in the alternative seafood space, and what are the drivers there for adoptions, and how you would evaluate in general the potential in seafood, alternative seafood, and also, of course, the main challenges here.
Sure, I can just give my 2 cents there. So we were looking at the seafood from the beginning, looking at meat and seafood across the board, and just decided to start with the products that we're starting with, both based on market demand, but also the best application for the mycelium that we're producing today. I think seafood, though, is a very worthy category to go into for a lot of reasons. My own drivers would just be because of for sustainability issues, and just because of overfishing and the dramatic decline in fish globally. But I think drivers for consumers are mostly around health and also sustainability. So I think what would be really important and would probably be the biggest challenges would be to, besides health, I'll put that aside, but texture and taste, I think, would be a challenge. But that's a challenge for everybody developing any product, I'd say. Fish, I think, is just particular in terms of the type of texture. It's not the same type of structure or muscle fiber structure that we have to try and emulate with our mycelium that we're working with for our chicken fillets or our pork fillets today. So I think it's a very interesting category to go into, but that's something for the future for BOSC. But again, when it comes down to health, I think one of the challenges will be ensuring that the nutritional composition of the products that you're producing are on par or better in some ways than of course fish, because that's going to help kind of push consumers over the line to want to purchase and to be repeat purchasers. But again, every single thing that we're producing, the drivers, and I'd say the challenges are sometimes the same, in that we have to produce products that have incredible texture, great taste, health, nutrition, and then of course price parity, if not being able to compete with the product that you're replacing, really. So for us, it's the meat industry. For fish, it would be fish. So yeah, it's a challenge, but those are the ones that I think we're all facing in what we're doing today. Yeah.
What about legal foods and also for greens and La Santé? Are you thinking about seafood? Is this too complex? Are you already busy enough with the other categories, the other species?
I mean, I think from our perspective, we also started with a little bit of a focus on seafood. We've now taken a few steps back to really focus on what we see as the three main meat categories, specifically pork, chicken, and beef. And basically the way that we've set up our product timeline is in a way that we can scale up in complexity of product and elaboration of product as well, right? You know, as having a focus on whole cuts from our end as well. You know, we started with the least complex of those formats, also very much driven by market demand. For those of you who don't know, pork is the second most consumed meat product worldwide and first in Europe. Being a company based in Barcelona, we had very clear that, you know, in order for us to have the impact that we wanted to have, that's where we wanted to start off first, right? And then go up in complexity to a chicken breast. And then finally, the product that is going to be our signature one in due time is going to be a libre steak, right? Which is a fungi-based whole cut steak. Now, in case there was any confusion earlier in terms of where we are with our development, I mean, make no mistake in terms of where our focus is in terms of developing a technology. You know, just as a B2C company that we are, we also understand first and foremost that we have to be learning from the market, right? What we need to understand is what we're doing here is we're opening up a whole new category, right? We cannot just say, hey, we're right on the coattails of plant-based. I think it's important for us to get across this message of fungi and mushrooms and what they can really bring to the table, and who's going to do that, right? Who's going to do that than ourselves? And, you know, science takes time, but so does building brand allegiance, right? How are we going to be able to build brand allegiance to leading fungi-based companies worldwide? We have to get on the market. And as a properly focused B2C company, you know, we have to look in terms of how do we get those market learnings, right? Let's just not develop a technology and hope that we're able to sell it, but actually really, okay, if we really want to have an impact on the market, we have to learn from the market. And building great products while developing great science is the challenge that companies that were founded in the last 2-3 years have to be able to find a way to do so, right? Which requires a lot of creativity on how to be able to do both things in parallel, right? How do you relieve that commercial stress from a scientific team to do great science, while at the same time keeping stakeholders at bay and at the same time being able to wow consumers with great products on the shelves. So that's what Libre is doing. And yeah, I think that's what's kind of made us stand out up until now.
Thanks for sharing that, really like a true startup perspective also to Isabella. I think this is super interesting how you tackle these issues as an entrepreneur, how you're going to launch a product, because there are certain things that just can't be changed by having great R&D and a great team and so on. Okay, so we got actually quite a lot of questions now, a growing number of questions from the audience. But since Fabio, if you want to dive into the scaling issue for one moment or a little longer, because Daniel in the beginning mentioned that that King for Greens or Kinder in the future will rather focus on like bioreactor farms with smaller volumes. Others are developing bigger and bigger bioreactors to actually make scaling up possible. So I'd like to take a quick round here with everyone, how you're maybe starting with the startups and then ending with Martin from the scientific side. How are you approaching this, and when can you reach scale, and what is the problem there? Daniel, again, because you started this discussion with your way of building bioreactors.
Yeah, so our plan is to have a production facility with about 30 or 40 of these 1,000 liter tanks. So being able to produce about 30 to 40,000 liter per week. And the advantage we see is being able to automate the whole process. One of the problems you have with these very large tanks is, you know, the mycelium attaches itself to everything. So if you have a 50,000, 100,000 liter tank, the mycelium will attach itself to the walls and all the little parts within the bioreactor. Then somebody has to go in there and scrape the mycelium off the side. The advantage we see in having the smaller bioreactors is that they can go into these sort of dishwashers, be cleaned, and then go straight into the production process again. So our turnaround time is very quick. And also we sort of minimize the contamination risk. The contamination risk is there, but you know, if we do have a contamination, then we lose 1,000 liters rather than 50,000 liters, or you know, whatever it may be. And so that's our approach. I'm not necessarily saying, you know, it's the best one or the correct one, but that's the route we're going down. And yeah, you know, it also allows us to, you know, if we have a company come to us and say, we just need 20,000 liters, then, you know, we don't have to start a 100,000 liter bioreactor and produce 100,000 liter and, you know, then having to sell that. We can just start 20 bioreactors and produce 20,000 liters and you know, be able to provide that. And you know, I think we've also seen an advantage of this decentralized production process. You know, we've had Corona, we had the Evergreen stuck in the Suez Canal, we had we unfortunately still have the war in Ukraine, and all of that has sort of brought to mind, you know, food security and supply chain issues. And again, having a decentralized production process comes with a lot of advantages, because in our case, you know, we'd be able to put these bioreactors to where they're needed to produce the mycelium, and then companies gain greater independence from the global supply of alternative proteins. So we're in the process of scaling, where we're going to have our production facility. Well, we'll have the walls standing by the end of the year, and we'll probably start production, our 30 to 40,000 liters by Q2 next year. And yeah, so because our CapEx costs are a lot smaller than conventional bioreactors, we'll be able to scale fairly quickly.
Yeah, so let's now move on to Isabella. Maybe you can keep it a bit briefer and talk about solid state fermentation and your challenges and your approach there to get to a scale up.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so I'd say it's quite different than what companies like Team for Greens have to do. And I think the challenges with solid state are that there's not necessarily a plug and play solution. You know, they're not today CMOs for commercially scalable production of solid mycelium, right? So that's something that is a big challenge, because that means that you have to develop your own type of manufacturing systems, or you need to basically crack the code for how you're going to basically develop your own type of facility. Our strategy is that we're actually looking to adjacent industries that have already scaled solid state fermentation products, and there's a few of those that are out there, and really to piggyback on the solutions that they have. But again, some of the challenges even in those own industries is, what are the most scalable solutions that can achieve the economies of scales that we need to in order to compete with animal, the prices of animal meat. So yeah, it is a challenge. I'd say scaling is the biggest challenge probably for most early stage companies working for mycelium production. But for us, that's our approach. And you know, just to give you examples, so we've already identified a few sites for ourselves that we're looking to start producing at, hopefully within the year, that would allow us to kind of get to a kind of semi-industrial stage. So yeah, I can go into more details if you have questions, but I think the biggest challenge, just in summary, for solid state is that you don't have the bioreactors that liquid state fermentation can work with. So you really have to think outside the box as to what type of manufacturing systems can you use to be able to scale. But I think the advantages of our approach is that it can actually be very cost competitive in comparison to maybe not King for Greens, but most liquid state fermentation facilities, because it can be very, very costly to work with the CMOs that are out there today. And of course, another challenge that was highlighted is that there is a big issue with commercial fermentation capacity. So there are a lot of companies that are coming up in the fermentation space, producing mycelium or producing, or working with precision fermentation, and there's definitely not enough capacity for them to all scale, which means that they will likely need to build their own production facilities or their own bioreactors, and that's incredibly expensive. I think the advantages to our approach is that we can work with existing manufacturing systems. They're not the obvious ones, and it takes time, and it takes like a deep level of expertise within the team to be able to retrofit your process to that new type of equipment. But if you're able to do that, you can do it in a much cheaper way. And there are manufacturing systems that are out there that you can rely on. So in a way, it may even be a more sustainable approach depending on the point of comparison, because you don't need to build new equipment. You can actually just retrofit something that's existing. Yeah.
Thanks, Isabella. Ivan, just if you would like to really ask you to keep it brief because we're running out of time, but it's interesting to hear about your approach and also what the location of the company in Mexico can help you with in terms of costs.
So our idea is to get the production close to the current production facility that we have for plant-based and make a synergetic relationship here. And one of the points that are very important for scale up and for really be efficient is to use cheap energy. In Mexico, we have the advantage of having cheap gas, but also one of our investors is also an expert in turbine cogeneration for creating gas and creating energy and creating the refrigeration. And these turbines are able to use hydrogen. So we're starting to see a super, super efficient and sustainable production system. And the other part is that we are also using solid state fermentation, and we're also creating our own bioreactors and our own tools. Actually, we filed our first patents last year for the quality control at scale, which we think that it's essential. At the end, if we don't deliver safe products to the people, then we're putting in danger the industry at whole. So we're super focused on that, and we're super focused on creating our own scaling tools for making this efficient.
Thank you. Thanks. Alan, what would you add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, from our side of things, we'll be showing the first bits of our technology around this time next year when we raise our next round. Basically, where we see also our focus and our aim down the line is we want to build out our own facility as well. I honestly do think that the future is a very similar setup to what Daniel described in terms of being smaller units, very portable, being able to be present in many different places. So this is a system that interests me for the long term as well. And, I don't think it came out during the conversation, but, aside from a passion for mycelium, another thing Ivan and I share is a home country. So, we're based in Barcelona right now, but I have every bit of interest to make it down to Latin America again and to be able to do something of impact in the region. And I think, setting up these kinds of facilities, not only democratizes options for food, but at the same time, it puts us close to a very lucrative market like the US in due time. So we aim to be able to start making or rolling out plans of that sort around 2025 time.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, sort of a cliffhanger from our side. ProVeg International is also taking a stronger focus on Mexico and Latin America in the future. So much for that at the moment. But now to Martin, you don't have a startup perspective, but you have these different projects. You have all these years of experience, and you can say, like, what is your perspective on scaling up? What's working and what's not?
Yeah, so it depends on submerged or solid state, but for the submerged, with this, actually the more general approach, after having an optimized medium, which includes, of course, also the pH, which is quite important. We're doing upscaling, and there we're looking at the shear stress. So that's one thing. You can use different propellers, you can use different speed. That has a great impact. Second impact is, of course, the oxygen availability, as we do see that some of those guys need quite a lot of oxygen in comparison to others. So though that is also a part which has to be considered when going for the upscaling. For a solid state, it's, as Isabella mentioned, not so much known. However, there comes also the oxygen into place, because if you think on a solid substrate, it depends on how thick the substrate is and how good the oxygen can be supplied also to the inner part of the substrate itself. Yeah? So you cannot go in large scale capacity. So you have to, in most cases, keep a flat substrate to allow oxygen to get into the substrate well. Besides problems of sterility, so the hygienic aspect is for solid substrate fermentation tough in comparison to the submerged fermentation, where you do have different possibilities to upscale in large vessels.
Since you're mentioning sterility, maybe we can take this one. I'm just looking at the questions here from Michael from Handmann. It's interesting to hear. He asks about sterility in submerged fermentation processes. Do they always have to be sterile, or is it sufficient to have sanitized conditions as it is for traditional fermentation? If you can take this one, Martin, that one checked.
So per se, I would keep it sterile as good as possible. Yeah, that means that you have to reduce the load of bacteria and other fungi inside the substrate, that your fungus of choice can cope with the other organisms. Yeah, and that normally takes up at 120 degrees for 20 minutes. Although you can reduce it if you know the substrate you're using. So that's for the submerged fermentation. So I would try to keep it as sterile as possible.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the scaling issue is so important. We could talk a lot about this, and you know, this is like the key to everything. But this is for the next round of our discussion at the Future Food series.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I must say, there's also one question regarding the application, since we were talking about food, but here's somebody addressing the pet food market. Could you talk about the traction or adoption you are getting there? Are the pet food producers of the world open to mycelium-based products?
Maybe for Daniel, since you mentioned it, and Martin, then if your perspective on this, if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think we're talking about to about 5 or 6 pet food producers, and so not only vegetarian or vegan pet food producers, but also traditional pet food producers who are now looking at mycelium, and so some companies which are interested in looking into it, others which have specific projects at looking at trying to work with mycelium. So I think there's a lot of interest, and so I think that could be a very interesting market for us.
Martin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the pet food market is not so restricted as the farmed animal market. Yeah, because there you do have a lot of regulations, and for the pet food, most things are allowed. Yeah, so, and of course, that's a possibility, as Daniel mentioned, that you can right now produce fungal mycelium and bring it into the market, and wait until your mycelium is granted as novel food by the EFSA, and then you do have, of course, a higher value. Yeah. Similar things happen for insect protein. Yeah. There you see a lot of insects coming into the pet food, and right now, as some novel food applications get through, so granted by the EFSA, they will shift to human consumption.
Okay, so to wrap it up, we can do this little game of like making predictions here for everyone, at least for startups. When will we see mycelium? I mean, this is for the EU at least. When will we see mycelium-based products on the market, on our shelves in the supermarket? Alan, you go first. Although you're betting on your fungi-based or mushroom protein, but take it first.
I mean, fungi includes it both. I would say, I mean, there's a few companies that have now been pumping up the efforts to try and push everybody forward, which is great. We aim to do the same, but I would hope that in a best case scenario, maybe in the next 3 to 5, hopefully, but that's best case.
Cool. Isabella?
Yeah, I think it's so hard to tell, but I think between, 20, like I'd say between 2 and 5 years is really what it can be. In the best case scenario, it can even be like 18 months, but that's at the point of submission of your dossier. So yeah, I'd say between 2 and 5 if you're being realistic, which is obviously a very big range. Depends on what EFSA asks for you after you submit. Yeah.
Daniel just lets them know that it's not novel food, so it will be when.
Well, I think there's another mycelium company from Hamburg which are about to bring their mycelium products to market fairly soon, which obviously very exciting and looking forward to that. So by the sounds of it, maybe end of this year, beginning of next year, which obviously will be great for the whole mycelium market.
Thanks. Yes, definitely looking forward to that. They've been around for a while. What about the US and Mexico? Because that's a different situation. You mentioned your booming launch.
Products are already sold in the US. I think that it's more about our capacity to deliver the product to the market. So I hope as soon as possible.
So yeah, so
perfect.
to wrap it up, right? Fabio, you mentioned in the chat that we will try to address all those questions that we could not take on today afterwards. That's quite an ambition, but we want to work on it. Thanks so much to everyone, to our fantastic panel here, foremost, and then the audience from all over the world.
Very informative, very inspiring. Thank you very much, and looking forward to see you all in our next session of the Future Food series. Albrecht and I are already planning to do a hybrid version. So, and we are just about to have our 10th session. So this will also our first Jubilee. So yeah, looking forward to it, and have a great evening, day, wherever you are. Thank you very much for participating today.
Thank you all. See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.
Thanks, Fabio. Thanks, Albrecht. Take care.